Welcome to today's Explainer. We are diving straight into a massive psychological paradox today, stemming from a profoundly haunting thought experiment in Adam Silvera's They Both Die at the End. We're going to break down how the terrifying, absolute certainty of an imminent death acts as the exact catalyst that forces two completely different teenagers to finally genuinely start living.
To really wrap our heads around the reality of this world, I want you to picture something. Imagine waking up, grabbing your phone to check the daily forecast just like we all do every single morning. But instead of seeing, a 60% chance of rain, you get a push notification that a Category 5 hurricane is going to hit your exact GPS coordinates before midnight. There are no storm shelters, you absolutely cannot outrun it. That inescapable, looming reality, that is exactly what the characters in our source material wake up to.
This inescapable notification comes courtesy of Deathcast. It's this massive bureaucratic machine that calls individuals, they call them Deckers, between midnight and 3 a.m. to let them know their timeline is officially up. Imagine your final, fatal phone call being addressed to Timothy, just because the caller, the Herald, is having an off day at the office and just got off the phone with another Timothy. It sounds incredibly brutal, right? But honestly, this chilling institutional detachment is a necessary psychological defense mechanism. I mean, if your 9-to-5 job involves delivering literal fatal news to complete strangers, you have to strip the humanity from the transaction, or the psychological weight would just completely crush you.
Now, what's really fascinating about this 24-hour warning is the psychology behind it. On paper, getting a grace period to say your final goodbyes sounds like a gift, way better than a sudden car crash for sure. But here's the thing. The human brain simply cannot process a known termination date with logical gratitude. As humans, we literally require the illusion of immortality. We need that psychological buffer just to function and confidently walk out our front doors every morning. Deathcast violently strips that buffer away, forcing an immediate, brutal psychological inventory of exactly who you are at this very second.
And it's wild to see how this exact same bureaucratic protocol completely shatters two completely different environments when we look at our protagonists. Just look at the stark contrast here. On one side, we have 18-year-old Mateo Torres. He's totally isolated in his bedroom, obsessively refreshing a blog to watch dying people document their final hours, completely paralyzed by his fear of the outside world. Then, on the flip side, 17-year-old Rufus Emeterio gets his call in a school parking lot while actively beating up his ex-girlfriend's new boyfriend. It's a highly destructive physical manifestation of massive survivor's guilt from a car crash that killed his entire family. The call holds a harsh mirror up to their deepest, most unresolved traumas.
Because the physical world doesn't really know how to handle the dying, these Deckers are instantly marginalized. So desperately seeking an escape, both boys pivot to the digital wilds. Notice the insane difference in the digital ecosystems popping up for the dying here. You have the Last Friend app, which manufactures platonic connection. And then you have Necro, which, amazingly, still charges a premium subscription fee for one-night stands even when the users only have hours to live. Mateo firmly rejects commodifying his final hours for cheap hedonism on Necro. So both boys choose the Last Friend app to search for some kind of meaning, but they approach that vulnerability in entirely different ways.
You can actually see exactly how differently they cope right in their app profiles. Mateo uses a photo of himself wearing a Luigi hat from a Mario Kart tournament, stating he wants to break out. Now, why a sidekick? Well, because it's an idealized projection. He wants to be the courageous secondary character finally stepping up into the light, rather than the terrified boy he actually is in reality. Rufus, on the other hand, is painfully pragmatic. He bluntly acknowledges he's a trauma survivor and states he just wants to go outright. So Rufus is searching for unvarnished redemption, while Mateo is desperately searching for courage.
Since time is literally the one currency neither of them possesses anymore, they leapfrog all the usual small talk and build trust through absolute necessity. And when they finally meet in person, Rufus instantly becomes a catalyst for Mateo's change. Right there in Mateo's apartment building, Rufus diagnoses the elevator as a death wish and forces Mateo to take the stairs. It is literal, physical exposure therapy. Rufus forces Mateo to take that first terrifying step out of his sanctuary and into the totally unpredictable reality of New York City.
But here's the reality check. Swiping on a new friend with zero historical baggage, that's the easy part. The real agony is saying goodbye to the people you already deeply love. Rufus tries to control this narrative by hosting a living funeral at his foster home, affectionately nicknamed Pluto. He has this deeply raw human need to sit on the couch and actually hear his own eulogies for validation. But the consequences of his unresolved anger catch up with him fast. The guy he assaulted earlier calls the cops to the foster home, forcing Rufus to literally flee out the back door on a bicycle, abandoning his closest friends. His desire for a messy, tearful, movie-perfect farewell is entirely blown apart.
Mateo's farewell is a crushing counterpoint to that. He literally goes through these 4 agonizing steps just to avoid reality. He visits his best friend Lydia, who happens to be asleep in the other room, but instead of waking her up and telling her he got the call, he cleans her apartment, leaves $400 in an envelope on the counter, blocks her phone number, and sneaks out silently. He convinces himself he's protecting her, but make no mistake, this silent farewell is a textbook manifestation of anticipatory grief and heavy avoidance.
The absolute tragedy here is that by ghosting Lydia, Mateo cruelly repeats her exact trauma. A year prior, Lydia's boyfriend Christian died without a proper farewell because she slept through his final texts. Mateo projects his own terror onto her. He tries to buy his way out of a massive emotional debt with $400 because he simply can't afford the psychological toll of a real goodbye. Rufus lost his goodbye to violence, and Mateo sacrificed his to cowardice. Pushed forward with absolutely zero closure, it's fascinating to watch how they attempt to navigate this final day together. Early on, they find a dead bird on the street, which Mateo insists on burying with this solemn, almost paralyzing reverence. But soon after, they run into a wild, chaotic Decker party on a moving subway car. It's incredible because both of them reject the subway party. Mateo rejects it because it represents uncontrollable chaos, and Rufus rejects it because a cheap, fleeting distraction completely devalues the genuine, authentic connection they are actively trying to build.
Running from that chaos, they end up landing at the Make a Moment station. The price tag for this experience? Exactly $240. Make a Moment is an entire business explicitly capitalizing on dying people by selling them the aesthetics of danger, like indoor skydiving, but with a 100% guarantee of safety. They basically strap into harnesses and skydive in front of giant industrial vents.
And this setup perfectly captures the illusion of risk-free living. As the VR experience hollows them out, you realize it's exactly like playing a video game on God mode. Sure, you feel totally invincible, but the novelty vanishes in minutes because there are zero stakes. Without the real risk of losing, the victory means absolutely nothing. Playing it completely safe doesn't actually preserve life. It ruins the very thrill of being alive. This VR rig serves as the perfect physical metaphor for how Mateo lived his first 18 years, suspended above the actual world, perfectly safe but never truly alive.
Now, Rufus is the force that unplugs Mateo from that simulation, for sure. But Rufus is evolving too. Before his end day, Rufus's Instagram was entirely in black and white. It served as this solemn, endless tribute to his drowned family. But on this final day, he starts posting completely unfiltered photos in full color. Choosing color symbolizes Rufus finally realizing that authentic living requires embracing the full, messy spectrum of human emotion. You cannot insulate yourself from the absolute risk of pain without also insulating yourself from the capacity to love.
It is genuinely staggering to think about. In just 24 hours, the inescapable certainty of death crams years of therapy and a lifetime of emotional transformation into a single day. Mateo evolves from a paralyzed shut-in into a boy bravely navigating the unpredictable city, and Rufus transforms from a highly reactive, traumatized survivor into a deeply introspective, vulnerable partner.
Now, this explainer isn't just about a fictional sci-fi world. It is a direct mirror for our own timelines. Take a second to evaluate your own routines right now. How much of your life is spent in the metaphorical safety of your bedroom? How often do you decline the invitation to the chaotic subway car, or avoid having a difficult, honest conversation with a loved one simply because you are relying on a tomorrow that absolutely isn't promised?
But before we go, there is one massive philosophical twist here that completely flips the script. Deathcast is a technological system that predicts death with 100% accuracy. But human death is often the result of thousands of micro-decisions, like choosing to take the stairs instead of the elevator. So if the algorithm knows exactly when they die, it raises a profoundly haunting question. Were Mateo's sudden bravery and Rufus's found new vulnerability truly free will? Or was that sudden, desperate desire to live just a programmed variable already baked into the equation of their demise? Does the awareness of your death grant you agency, or does the very act of trying to outrun your fate guarantee it? As you navigate the rest of your day, ask yourself if your choices are truly your own, or just the predictable patterns of a life lived on autopilot.